Hi everybody, it's Dan here. So in this video, we're going to be reviewing the fire resistive requirements for building, and we'll be using the City of Chicago Building Code as an example of where to find the fire resistive requirements for walls and floors, ceilings, and just assemblies in general that are required in construction and in buildings. We'll go through the building code, and then we'll look at an example of a project floor plan and go through the assemblies of the walls and the floor and the other aspects of that floor plan. So let's get started.
Okay, so what is a fire rating? Basically, it's a value that's given to a material or an assembly of materials. And typically, the fire ratings for walls, floors, and roofs are like 1, 2, and 3 hours. And for doors and frames, it's usually a third of the walls, like 20 minutes or 45 minutes or 1 hour. And we'll find these fire ratings in the local, state, and federal building codes. And in this example, we're going to do the Chicago Building Code, but we can also find them in International Building Code. And all right, so let's take a look at the code. We're at 136100 types of construction fire resistive requirements. And I'm going to look at the table and choose type 1A as our fire resistive construction type. And they've listed here a lot of the elements in the assemblies. Exterior bearing walls has a 4-hour wall, meaning 4 hours of fire resistance. Interior or exterior non-bearing wall, they've got a lot of different items we can look at. And interior bearing walls, they say that that one's a 4-hour bearing wall. Interior non-bearing walls and partitions, they list as item G, and we'll take a look at that in a second. And columns at 4 hours of fire resistance. We can see that we've got the interior columns. They're at 3 hours if they're supporting the roof, and the other ones are at 4 hours. Beams, girders, and trusses, 2 hours. They give some other factors here, other types of beams and girders and trusses. Floor construction at 3 hours, and roof construction at 2 hours. And we'll scroll down a little bit. Once we scroll down, we can see that item G, we have to check out these sections 15.8.120 to 15.8.250, and that was for the interior partition. So let's check that stuff out. And I'm going to go to 15.8.240. And in 15.8.240, we can see public quarters and area separations in business, mercantile, industrial, and storage units of buildings fully protected by a standard sprinkler system as defined in blah blah blah. Floor construction and ceiling construction, public corridor shall be of construction providing fire resistance of not less than 1 hour. So we know that then the public corridors and area separations in a sprinklered building, they basically have to be 1 hour rated. The thing I want to mention is about separations. We'll go back to 1356, and this is mixed occupancy fire resistive separations, which is something we should pay attention to. So if we have a residential occupancy that is adjoining, say, like a business occupancy, which is class E, not B, but E, we can see that we need a 1 hour firewall separating those types of occupancies. And you can cross-reference the occupancy classifications of other items on here with one another so you can see what's required for the separation between those occupancies. Okay, let's move on and take a look at a drawing. So here's an example drawing. This is a building in the city of Chicago. It's at 75 East Wacker. It's a high-rise building. It was built back in the 1920s, and this is a project that I worked on a few years back where we were doing a gut renovation of about 10 floors and turning those floors into hotels. And so it's an existing building, and we've got, if we take a look at this building in regards to the fire resistance and the assemblies, if we look at the exterior wall, this building has an exterior bearing wall that's 4 whites thick of brick. And so that's going to equal at least 4 hours of fire resistance, and that's what the code requires. So this section here is 4 whites thick, and it would be a 4-hour wall, which is what's required, which is cool.
the other structural items of the building, such as the interior columns, even exterior columns. Those guys are wrapped in concrete, so their concrete covering is about 4 inches thick, and that's going to equal about 4 hours of fire resistance. And again, that's what the code requires. So 4 hours there for those interior columns and also for the exterior columns. The floor is made of concrete, and in the code it says that our floors need to be 3-hour fire rated. So we've got at least 3 inches of concrete there, and so that's a 3-hour assembly. When we have stuff like stairs penetrating the floor, that's creating a hole in the floor, which is obviously compromising the fire resistance. And so stair enclosures, elevator enclosures, and stuff that's penetrating the floor like mechanical shafts, these guys that are kind of peppered throughout the floor, probably missing one or two, but basically that's what those are. Anytime we have these penetrations through the floor, that duct will need to be encased in a wall, and those walls will need to be 2-hour fire rated. Same thing around the stairs and the elevators. Those walls oftentimes are made of metal framing with 2 layers of gypsum board on either side, and I'll show you an example of what that type of wall looks like. Oftentimes they're also made of concrete block or CMU, and that gives a resistance of at least 2-3 hours. So sometimes you'll see a concrete block surrounding a elevator shaft or a stair. What other items do we have here? Roof construction, it's not really shown here, but that's a 2-hour fire rating. Oh yeah, of course, we've got the partitions that separate the sleeping rooms. So any of the partitions on this floor that separate sleeping rooms, those are listed in the code as 1-hour fire rated partitions. And in the case of this particular project, these walls are actually 2-hour rated, mainly because for the sound resistance of the walls. So while in this project they're 2-hour, they're really 1-hour fire rated requirements. And so that's for all these guys that are separating the sleeping rooms. So I think that really covers everything in this particular example. And maybe what I'll do is next I'll show you guys what some of these walls actually look like. So here's an example of some of the drawings that we did for the interior partitions, and if you take a look at one of these examples there we go, zooming this in so we can see what's going on. We can see that this guy here, it's a 2-hour rated partition, and I think one of the things that's good to note is that these have a designation, a UL designation. In this case it's UL 412, which is a type of wall that Underwriters Laboratory has tested and determined that it's a 2-hour fire rated wall. So if there's a fire on this side of the wall, it takes 2 hours to penetrate those through those pieces of gypsum board. And if there's a fire on this side of the wall, same thing would take place. And that's what's interesting about these types of partitions, is that you have to have essentially, it's like a double wall. This is 2 hours on this side of resistance, and on this side it's 2 hours. And that's because we have this, a stud that's in the middle that's holding these pieces of drywall up, and the stud itself is not fire resistant. So you have to have, protection on both sides of the stud. Now, if this wall were constructed of concrete block, and let's say they're 8-inch block or something like that, then you don't really have to have a full, you know, 2 hours on each side. Essentially, the wall itself is a mass wall, and if the fire is on this side, it takes 2 hours to penetrate through the entire wall going that direction, and the same thing for the other side. It takes another 2 hours to go through the wall going on the other way. So that wall is self-supporting, and therefore it can be a little thinner actually, in order to help with the fire resistance. Let's get rid of some of this so I can see what's going on and show you guys what's happening. The 1 hour fire rated partition, this guy here, you'll notice it's the designation, UL designation of, oops, probably drew over that so you can't see it, but it's U419. And if you go to the UL website or UL guide, you'll note that the walls are designed a little differently than what these look like, although these are based off of those requirements in the UL guide. The UL will state a number of different things for a wall type. They'll say, well, it has to have, you know, gypsum on either side. It has to have a certain type of stud. Sometimes the studs can be thicker or thinner, or dimensionally the type of stud could be a 2.5 inch stud or 3 5/8 inch stud. Oftentimes they give a variety of different things that can be done, but that they'll still meet the fire rating for this type of wall. So those are a couple examples of a 2 hour wall and a 1 hour wall. And let's see what else we have on here. I think probably worthwhile noting the 2 hour rated shaft partition. This would be a partition that would be placed around a shaft or a duct that's running through a floor. So in the case of this wall, you would actually have this be a duct here, and this wall is specifically designed so that the contractors that are working on it, when they place this wall in, they can't really get to this side of the wall because this duct will already be there. So they have a special kind of track and a special piece of drywall that goes on the inside, and they're able to tape and sand that, and then they're able to apply the rest of the wall to it. So the wall on this side, again, same condition has to apply, where we have 2 hours of fire resistance going this direction, and we have to have 2 hours of fire resistance going in the other direction, and that makes it a 2 hour wall. So there's a variety of these types of partitions. This one's a shaft partition, and you'll note that, you know, these things, although they're slightly different looking, they're still what are they, 438 Underwriter's Laboratory listing for the wall. So that's a few different types of wall partitions and how they would look in a drawing. And I think that pretty much covers this workshop. So hopefully that was helpful, and we'll see you guys next time. Is to show you guys how to mark up your drawings and add the information with regards to the fire ratings of walls. So what we typically do is we will show these little lollipops on the walls, and we'll identify that the wall is a certain type of wall type. Like I'll say this is wall type A, and maybe there'll be a different wall type, I don't know where, maybe this one is wall type B or something like that. And then we'll ask you guys to just simply type out, instead of like drawing. We don't need the whole drawing actually, we just need you to type it out. And I think what that might look like, I will edit this real quick. So I would say like wall type A. That would be, I have a little cheat sheet here. Let's say it's a 2 hour fire rated partition, and it'll be UL, oops, trying to get the capital in there, or not. Alright, forget it. UL 412, and I'll do something like I'll say that it's a what type of stud? Well, let's call it 3 5/8 inch metal stud with 2 layers of gypsum board each side. Yeah, there's a capital I don't want. I don't want that either. Okay, so that would be the wall type A, and then you would do the the next wall type. So wall type B as an example, and then on and on. You'll have to probably have a 1 hour wall type, and you have a 2 hour wall type, and you can put other wall types in there if you want to, like just standard partition. It may not be fire rated, but I don't think that's really required. So that's how we'll ask you guys to document on your drawings the wall types. That is really it for now until the next workshop. All right, bye guys.